Welcome to another episode of Virtual Coffee with Ashish. Sorry, I just have to turn around. So this is one of those while editing videos. Just wanted to come up here and talk about building company culture. Why is it important? What does a good company culture look like? I have Graeme here, and he's shed light on the fact why a culture is important and what a good example of a culture is with remote employees during COVID. Hopefully you like the episode. If you do, like and subscribe. That's one of the episode. Welcome to the Virtual Coffee with Ashish. Today is an interesting episode. I've kind of had, it's one of those soft skills that people always talk about where, it's the culture of the organization that I want to join that makes a difference for me. It's not how much they pay me. It's not about how much, money I make or how much amazing companies, it could be Facebook, Google, whatever. All companies nowadays struggle with culture. And I found someone who can probably shed some light, especially if you're a growth organization. Now, thanks to COVID, a lot of us have been forced to go online and work remotely. And I got someone online. I found someone who literally wrote an article on how to work remotely. So thankfully, we have someone. And I'm going to bring him over. And hey, Graeme.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thanks for coming online, man.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So for people joining in now, Graeme literally wrote like an article on how to build culture for remote employees as well. And I think it's worthwhile calling out that it's not a new problem. It has been there in a lot of spaces before COVID happened as well. But I think it's kind of highlighted that, some of the fields in IT, especially like cybersecurity, no one ever thought about this until like now suddenly everyone's, we are working remotely. I don't even know what's being pushed in the pipeline or things like that. But I'm glad I have Graeme here. And as always, I'm not going to try and butcher his introduction. So Graeme, for people who don't know you, how would you describe Graeme?
Okay. Well, I think that's probably how that's how I probably describe myself. So I spent 10 years in the military, and I've still struggled to shake that probably the culture that had become so embedded in me there. But yeah, I love doing outdoors things. I love everything that you'd expect of an ex-military man. Even having spent 5 years now in the private sector, still struggle to shake that tail, and I think that really starts to answer some of what we're going to talk about today, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and thank you for your service, by the way. Really appreciate when I get ex-military people as well. And funny enough, a lot of ex-military people do enter cybersecurity. I don't know why, but yeah. Maybe it's a culture thing, and it's all about I want to keep this safe.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that, and I think at the same time you see one person going in and being successful in that environment, and then there's quite a train that creates.
Yeah. By the way, before we start with the questioning, just doing a quick beverage check. I've got my beverage. Awesome. Cheers. Love New York.
and a bit of Disney as well, which is another.
The Mickey Mouse. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was a cast member there back when I was at university. So actually, it's about customer service and really doing things right by the customer or the guest, as Disney would have you call them.
Oh, there you go. Well, I think that's a good way to start then. How do you get into cybersecurity, like military, and then what brought you into cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of paths that people have at my age, and really I was that kind of 13, 14-year-old kid who spent far too long on his computer and just wanted to get up to a bit of mischief and probably no good. So yeah, I was kind of interested from a young age about how things worked and how things could be broken and how controls could be stepped to the side of each of them. But actually didn't kind of fall off the rails and go down that route. Thankfully, had the military to fall back and put me on the straight and narrow quite quickly. And then had a military career as a Royal Signals officer. So working with networks and working with secure networks, but not really from a cybersecurity point of view, more from a network planning, deployment capacity point of view. And during the latter time in my career, I really started to see a few doors open for cybersecurity. It started to become a key growth area in the military. And then I tried to position myself for those roles. So worked in quite a lot of cyber roles at the end of my career. before deciding that the private sector was the place that I needed to go if I wanted to work in cyber and cloud, and really have something a little bit more interesting for the future.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it definitely brings in a unique perspective as well. I find it amazing that really, I mean, I guess cybersecurity professionals that I've spoken to, everyone has been like super smart, really interesting background, but not many start off with cybersecurity. Somehow they all end up in cybersecurity, but they all don't. And I think it's amazing because everyone who's not from a cybersecurity perspective, they bring in their own, I guess, experience and another world experience into the cybersecurity field, which is amazing. So I do appreciate that. The first question that I have for you is, what does culture mean for you, and where does that intersect with cybersecurity?
Okay, so I think there's a definition of culture that most people will fall back to, and it's coined by Herb Keller from Southwest, which is a culture is what people do when no one is looking. And apologies if I've butchered that phrase, but essentially that's what it is. It's the underlying values of an organization and the people within that organization. And that phrase of what they'll do when no one is looking, it's because it's so ingrained in them that it doesn't matter if anyone's looking, if anyone's checking. That's what they deal with. People often confuse culture with things like your organizational values, which can be a part of your culture, but they're not your culture writ large. And I think one big thing that I'm seeing a lot of at the moment is people think they can manufacture a culture, which true, you have to grow it in certain growth organizations, but they think you can manufacture it by the addition of a ping pong table and a slide to an office. It's much more fundamental than that. The second part, I guess, of the question was the intersection of security and culture. And I look at this in a couple of ways. Security can really either undermine or underline your culture. And depending on how that culture is and how security intersects and is overlaid on top of that, can really depend on which one of these it's doing. So a way you could look at that is, you look at policing. Ultimately, policing is a security function. And if you see police out on the streets, that can make you feel really safe and at ease in certain scenarios. In other scenarios, it can create a bit of panic, heightened suspicion, heightened awareness. And InfoSec's really similar. So you've got to be able to make sure that you're on the right side of that. You want people to be doing the right thing when no one's watching. But what you don't want to do is imply a lack of trust in your workforce and create a sense of fear.
Oh, that's an interesting one. And I think too, I love the policing comparison as well, because when you do see a cop on the road, usually you're not scared unless you've committed a murder or something. Then you're basically looking at the police officer and go, oh, does he know, or does he or she know that I've done this? And I think that's kind of where the fear or the negative vibe about cybersecurity comes in from as well, where, it's all about policing, it's all about the book. But I think there's a reason why, say, I don't want to use a COVID example, but I think even during a curfew or a protest or something, there's a reason why they're there to contain the damage. It's not to it's not to amplify it. It's basically to control it to a point that it doesn't cause chaos for everyone else who's not involved in it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very similar in this case as well. And I love the example that you gave about culture is not about ping pong tables, because I've had organizations in the past where we had ping pong tables, and there have been kombuchas. I don't know if you drink kombucha, but there's kombucha on tap. And I'm like, what is this thing? And yeah, it's just bizarre how that doesn't make a difference.
No, it can probably be a small indicator of maybe the way that organization thinks, because there will be some organizations where you absolutely would not get a ping pong table. That's not to say the culture's bad there, but it probably starts to say something about their culture to an extent.
Yeah, and taking this another notch up with remote employees, now everyone's working remote, right? I think there's no point of having a ping pong table because you're not there to drink kombucha anymore. So in case of a remote employee, how does this change?
Yeah, so I think this really interesting question actually, and I think looking at how it changes with remote employees is one thing, and has it changed due to COVID another. So COVID's probably been the biggest driver for technological change that we've had since maybe the internet. I don't know.
Most likely.
Yeah,
most likely, yeah.
it's really pushed the timeline, shut the timeline on making sure that people can operate remotely. But what it hasn't done is overnight changed culture. It's not a ping pong table. Maybe it is a ping pong table. It's not changed culture in that sense. The culture is underlying within the organization, and the culture maybe needs to adapt to this, but it hasn't been a driver for change of this. What we found really important within Matillion, where I work at the moment, is that we use the principles of a guy called Patrick Lencioni, who talks about the 5 dysfunctions of team, with essentially establishing trust is the bottom pillar of this. But what he talks about is what makes a culture. In his latest book, I think it's called The Advantage, really worth a read. He talks about how you can actually generate a culture and how you can generate that through ensuring that all the senior leaders and therefore the messaging throughout your organization is aligned. Those areas that you need to align are things such as working as a team, how you align, how you communicate, and then start looking at the principle and the fundamentals of your business of why do you exist? How do you behave as a business? What do you do? How are you going to succeed? And I think the most important one is what's most important right now and who must do what on the back of that. Those things don't change whether you're in a post-COVID world, a pre-COVID world, remotely, or all sat in a very small office. All of those remain the same, but having that transparency is what's important. So if you get that right, you can push that across any kind of business, no matter how you are configured.
Yeah.
For us, we've managed to, I think we've got that really spot on. So then when we've moved to a much more remote much more remote workforce than we had, we've been able to extrapolate that across with relative ease, because everyone is aligned, everyone knows what direction they're pulling in, and everyone knows what is most important.
That's really interesting. And I think the real challenge, and you're right, if you already built something that kind of carries over into a remote world as well. Mm-hmm. But as we move forward, and a lot of countries and states are basically saying, well, we need to figure out how to live with COVID, which potentially means we are hiring people remotely as well. Sure. Which brings in another challenge. And it's funny because the job that I'm at right now as well, I was hired remotely. Mm-hmm. I was like, the first time I went into the office was like a month after being hired. And it was funny. It was a weird experience to begin with, because I think I never expected myself to join a company and not even though I'm in the same city as the office, not going to the office for like over a month or something. But so do you reckon it changes, or what kind of practices can you build to onboard people with that same culture, or highlight that culture when you're trying to onboard people as well? Is there some thoughts around that as well for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've not stopped hiring since COVID. We've still had a couple of hires, and we obviously have that issue. We've got a lot of tools to be able to help us with this. So yes, we've got that culture set, but how do we maintain that? And that was actually what the main point of this, the article that you referenced, which is on my LinkedIn at the minute. We use a number of different tools. So we've signed up to something called Donut, which is an app that sits on top of Slack. That looks at the interactions between you and other people within your organization. It ranks them, and then it pairs you up every week and says, go and grab a donut, or a virtual coffee in our case, with someone once a week, 15 minutes, and maybe don't talk so much about work or something directly project related. Just talk about each other. And because it's pairing you up in that sense, you're getting to know people across the organization who you don't have strong relationships with. That's great at a fundamental level. Next one up, how we keep that alignment regularly. We have 2 weekly town halls where our CEO and exec team sit down on Zoom.
Okay.
We use Slido to bring questions in from everyone across the organization, both anonymously and named, vote them up, and then we have real candid sessions where we can ask anything that's going on with the organization, and we will drive answers that way. And on top of that, we have another thing that we've slightly changed in a post-COVID world. We have a What's on My Mind session. So this is a 30-minute session on Zoom once a week from anyone within the exec team now, who just talks about what's keeping their mind occupied that week. What it really does is keeps that constant alignment back to our core plan of what's going on in the business and how we're navigating such choppy waters.
It's really interesting because I've seen donut and virtual coffee. I've seen there was something else that people are doing morning tea as well, like a virtual morning tea. You know, the events that used to happen, like you're trying to raise funds. It's like a virtual morning tea. And I thought, that's a really interesting concept that you're able to bring that in or hold those events still. But kind of like what you and I are doing. We have our own beverage at our end, but we're participating in an event which other people can get to see as well. And if they want to contribute, they get to contribute. I think it's like building that little or continuing to do those little things. Is that what sets the foundation for a good culture?
No, I think I think going back to the kind of Lencioni principles of what makes a corporate culture and how you kind of transcend that across an organization is what makes it. So it's ensuring alignment and communication and transparency from the top down and understanding where every part of the business plays in achieving your key, most important goal at that point in time. I think that's what makes the culture. But because you've got that consistent alignment across the board, it means then that you can create things like this to really help drive some of these areas. So a lot of the things that you discussed there, actually, we've benefited from the technological change that's been driven by COVID. I say the world has been benefited by this because actually we've had a lot of things that would have been great to do face-to-face that we can't do, but we've now got a load of things that we can do and they're becoming more popular that can be done over the internet. So like this, we host yoga sessions, fitness competitions, all of this fun stuff that really just helps people enjoy their working day as well a bit more. And we've made some really nice changes as well, like moved meeting times to 25 minutes instead of 30, just to give people a break from the constant Zoom eye that they'll get of being on Zoom all day. Or playing, interactive games to get to know each other a little bit more, like through the keyholes of British TV show that I don't know. But we played that on Zoom, where we'll give some photos into one person central in the organization, and then we try and guess whose house it is we're looking at on the screen. All of this is great fun, and I'm making a place an enjoyable place to work. But setting a culture for me really comes from the transparency and communication and alignment of efforts against a clearly defined strategic goal.
Yep, and I think transparency 100%. Do you feel like these are qualities you're able to see before you even join a company?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. There's a number of chances you get as an interviewee, I guess, to go and understand this, and more so the more crowdsourced intelligence we have on this kind of stuff. So Glassdoor for me is the first place that I'd ever look when joining an organization, and it was certainly one of the places that I looked when I joined my current organization. And you really get a sense for a company by looking at it, because you can see if people have written a truly heartfelt review or not.
Wow.
And often, you get the TripAdvisor effect, where certain people only write a negative review, and it's harder to leave a positive one. Well, that's to me, when you do get positive ones, they're obviously worth even more weight. And joining Matillion, we had outstanding 5-star reviews across every area.
Wow.
Which said a lot to me. But then you can go further. During the interview process, you get a real feel for it. And the way Matillion interviews, it's never a really kind of half an hour or an hour boxed interview with competency-based questions. We really open everything up so that the interviewee really gets to question us and see the organization. I interviewed with some of the newest hires within the organization. Were on the interview panel for me, as well as some of the senior developers, who I was not really going to have a lot of interaction with, but needed to understand where they were coming from and where the business had been founded, and that real kind of candid conversation. That's really cool.
And to your point, comes back to the transparency as well, because you're able to be transparent with other people and doing for anyone who's listening in and is going through an interview process and kind of wondering, I wonder what the culture is like. And if you're not able to have a transparent conversation with your interviewee or sorry, interviewer, I guess in this context as well, because it's a two-way conversation. It's not just that them telling you how or why you should join, but it's also you deciding, should I join this company?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things we've worried about from. We always bring people into the office and let them kind of sit around the office and meet whoever they might meet whilst they're waiting to go in for an interview. And obviously we can't do that right now. So we're looking at ways at which we can try and show people at least what Matillion is in the physical form as well. And we've looked at trying to achieve that as well over the next few months.
That's really interesting. And I think we mentioned, we spoke about cybersecurity culture, we spoke about culture in general in an organization and how to kind of amplify it during a remote environment. How does this change for a growth organization versus a bigger organization? I understand you have had a lot of experience in the growth organization as well. For people who may not know what a growth organization is, if you can start with that and then go into if it changes for growth.
Sure. So I think the big difference that you get here is that when an organization's going through that growth phase, they need to focus on a couple of areas. And it's really important for someone, especially if they've got a product that they're selling, they need to look at making sure their product fits the market and making sure that their sales pipeline is ready to go. So they need good go-to-market and good product. And if they've got those two things, they're going to do well and do well on that growth curve and continue to expand at a real pace. So what that leaves you with is a couple of interesting dynamics that you need to consider when you're looking at culture. Firstly, you've got rapid growth of the size of your organization, but rapid growth within the markets as well. And that culture that you start with on day one might evolve. It's important that it probably does evolve. But also it's important that you don't lose sight of what was important to you as a founder or as a small business at that stage. So you've got this one element of a growing workforce and growing revenue to deal with. On the flip side of this, you've focused on product and you've focused on go-to-market. You might not have focused on some of the areas that don't drive return of investment straight away. And security is one of these. It's really difficult to show ROI on security. So that's why security is often not the first one sat in the room. Now, I have been with organizations where I've been one of the first people sat in the room from a security point of view in a company that was 4 strong and ended up as 150 strong by the time I was leaving. But they were very sector specific. So they were security was so important to that sector, they could not afford to get it wrong. You take other ones, and Zoom's, the poster boy for this story at the moment. They've risen like this before COVID and carried that on through COVID. They've then hit the real issues when security was kind of came unhinged a little bit there. And when you look at Zoom, you say, did they get anything really wrong? They probably didn't. They might have been a little bit late to the party with some of the hires, but they've invested in that now and they've been really transparent about it. Should they have done this a little bit earlier? Maybe. Should they have done it a lot earlier? Absolutely not, because they needed to get that product right and they needed to get go-to-market right, and that's where they needed to invest their capital. Investing it in security needed to come slightly later on. Does that answer the questions?
It does, and I think it does, and I think it does bring an interesting point as well. If cybersecurity may not be important, and to your point, well, you don't even know if you would have enough money in the kitty to buy a security product or talk about all these amazing security things that you have and certifications you would get. If you can't sell the product, it doesn't make a difference because there's no one to it's the most secure software in the world, but no one wants to buy it. What's the point of it? You might as well just put that money in the bank then at that point.
Exactly. Look, security, I always say to everyone, it's a function of risk. And ultimately, risk you're looking at various number of factors. But if you're not in business, that's the biggest risk is going out of business, especially in a growth organization. So you need to make sure that you're able to grow and able to continue. If security is going to block that, then it's not going to work.
And to your point, bringing it back to the whole culture thing as well. Say, for example, most likely a growth company also means the security team would be quite small. It would not be, say, 20, 30 people. It might be 2 or 3, 4, maybe 5, maybe, I mean, sometimes it's just one person.
Yeah.
How does one build or think about cybersecurity culture in a growth organization from then?
So yeah, building it's a real challenge, and it is always you're everyone, and you're everyone from an analyst through to an engineer through to a CISO and everything in between, every hour of every day.
Yep.
And what's happening. So the way that I think you think about this across an organization like that, you've got to leverage the teams that you've got in place. Just because you're a 1-man, a 3-man, a 5-man band, that doesn't mean that you can't work closely with infrastructure, with DevOps teams, with IT teams, with anyone outside of the technology space, with your finance team, your legal teams, to make sure that you can actually get your security work done. And this all comes back to the key point that I make about culture, and it's all about alignment. If everyone knows that you're at this stage within your journey, your Zoom, your whoever else, and you've decided our focus for the next 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever it may be, is around security, and here's why. You bring everyone on that journey with you as a top level exec team, but then also as the security team. People will be feel obliged to help you actually achieve that, because they see how it works as part of those more strategic goals. So when I started with the organization, I joined, and we had this super all hands, which was all of our American counterparts coming over to Manchester, and we had a big we at least the Science Museum in Manchester had a big session there for 2 days, all around alignment and corporate strategy. And I spoke on that for the first time to the organization, and I gave everyone an analogy of how security was important, but it's not the most important thing, and how it actually helps the organization move faster to its strategic goals. And it's one that security professionals use a lot, but it's around the Japanese bullet train. So this was designed to be the fastest train that was ever made, and it was. The engine could, and the maglev technology meant they could go ridiculously fast, but it could go faster. And the reason it couldn't go faster was because the brakes were not capable of slowing it down on time. So actually, how did they make it go faster? They made better brakes or better security that allowed it to stop quicker, and actually therefore sped it up. So this analogy really resonated, and hopefully really aligned the security messaging to the organizational messaging, which then meant we could go forwards as one on that message. And I've had some really great support across the organization to deliver this now.
Wow. I'm going to steal that analogy. That is a great analogy. I'm going to steal that if you don't mind.
I have to just fact check some of it, but it's pretty much.
Yeah. But no, it kind of makes sense. Even if it's like a hypothetical speed train, it does make sense. If you can't stop the train, what's the point of speeding up?